cold, satisfied smile crept across Officer Vance Harlan's face as the heavy steel handcuffs clicked shut around the wrists of the quiet man in the faded gray hoodie. Vance believed he had just secured another easy arrest to pad his monthly quota. Just another guy who clearly did not belong in this wealthy neighborhood. Yet, as he roughly shoved the silent man into the back of his police cruiser, he completely missed the cold, calculating glint in his captive's eyes. Vance did not know it yet, but this nobody was not merely innocent. He was the worst possible person a corrupt, bullying cop could ever target. His entire career, his freedom, and his arrogant worldview were about to be violently ripped apart by a fleet of black SUVs. The morning sun over Oak Ridge, a notoriously affluent and insular suburb in the Pacific Northwest, shone bright and deceptive. It was the kind of morning where the streets were lined with manicured lawns, luxury SUVs, and people walking golden retrievers. To Officer Vance Harlan, a veteran of the Oak Ridge Police Department, this was his kingdom. Vance was a man who wore his badge not as a shield for the public, but as a heavy club, to swing at anyone he deemed unworthy of his town. Broad-shouldered with a tightly clipped buzz cut and eyes that always seemed to be searching for a reason to be angry, he had a reputation. He was the cop who had accumulated over a dozen citizen complaints, ranging from excessive force to blatant racial profiling, all of which had been conveniently swept under the rug by a complacent police union and a precinct captain who prioritized arrest statistics over civil rights. Sitting in the passenger seat of the patrol cruiser was Rookie Officer Bryce Nolan. Bryce was recently out of the academy, a nervous, idealistic young man who was quickly learning that the reality of policing under Vance Harlan was a nightmare. Bryce kept his mouth shut, his eyes glued to the passing storefronts, praying for a quiet shift. "Look at this," Vance suddenly sneered, tapping the steering wheel with a thick finger. He slowed the cruiser to a crawl as they approached the high-end artisanal coffee shop on Elmwood Avenue. Bryce blinked, leaning forward to follow Vance's gaze. "Look at what? The coffee shop?" "Not the shop, Rookie. The curb." Parked legally in a 2-hour spot was a nondescript, late-model dark blue sedan. Sitting in the driver's seat with the window rolled down to let in the crisp morning air was a middle-aged black man. He wore a simple, faded gray hooded sweatshirt and a dark baseball cap pulled low over his brow. He was holding a small paper cup of espresso in one hand and scrolling methodically through a tablet with the other. He was not playing loud music. He was not looking around nervously. He was simply existing, enjoying a quiet morning. But to Vance, his mere presence was a glaring anomaly. "Out-of-state plates, Virginia," Vance noted, his voice dropping into a low, predatory register. "Sitting there for who knows how long. Casing the joint, probably. Doesn't belong in this zip code." Bryce shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Vance, he's just drinking coffee. The shop just opened. Maybe he's just taking a break before a drive." "You're naive, Nolan," Vance snapped, sharply turning the steering wheel and pulling the cruiser up directly behind the blue sedan. He hit the switch for the emergency lights. The red and blue strobes violently shattered the peaceful morning ambiance reflecting off the storefront windows. "People who look like that dressing like a thug in a neighborhood where houses cost millions, they're up to something. Let's go see what our friend is hiding." In the blue sedan, Elias Caldwell let out a slow, exhausted sigh as the flashing lights filled his rearview mirror. Elias was profoundly tired. He had just flown in from Washington, D.C. after a grueling operation. As the deputy director of the FBI's National Security Branch, Elias had spent the last few days coordinating a multi-agency takedown of a massive domestic cyber-terrorism ring. He had come to Oak Ridge on a rare leave to attend his niece's high school graduation. He was a man who commanded thousands of federal agents, a man who briefed the President of the United States. Right now, however, he just wanted to drink his overpriced macchiato, review a few unclassified briefings on his tablet, and go to his sister's house. He watched in the side mirror as the heavy-set patrol officer stepped out of the cruiser, resting his hand casually but deliberately on the butt of his service weapon. Elias's highly trained eyes picked up every micro-expression, every aggressive nuance in the officer's posture. He recognized the swagger immediately. It was the swagger of a man who believed a badge granted him absolute immunity. Elias calmly set his coffee in the cup holder. He pressed the power button on his tablet, slipping it onto the passenger seat. He did not reach into his pockets. He did not make any sudden movements. He simply rested both hands visibly on the top of the steering wheel and waited. He had spent his entire life navigating the sharp edges of the world, and despite his immense power and authority, he knew exactly how dangerous a bad cop with a chip on his shoulder could be. "Morning," Vance barked as he reached the driver's side window. He did not bother offering a polite greeting. He leaned in close, deliberately invading Elias's personal space, trying to intimidate him. "License, registration, and proof of insurance. Right now." Elias turned his head, his expression unreadable, his voice calm and deep. "Good morning, officer. Is there a problem? Was I parked illegally?" "I asked the questions," Vance snapped, annoyed that the man was not immediately trembling or fumbling over his words. "I said, license and registration. Do you have a hearing problem?" Elias did not flinch. "I'm perfectly willing to provide my identification, officer. However, as I'm parked legally and the engine is off, I am simply inquiring as to the reasonable, articulable suspicion for this detainment. Are you investigating a specific crime?" Bryce, who had walked up to the passenger side of the vehicle, swallowed hard. "Oh no," he thought. "He knows the law. Vance is going to lose his mind." Vance's face flushed a deep, ugly red. His jaw clenched. To Vance, a black man asking about his constitutional rights was the ultimate insult. It was a direct challenge to his authority. "You want suspicion?" Vance sneered, leaning closer. "My suspicion is that there's been a rash of burglaries in this area, and you fit the description of a suspect we're looking for." It was a blatant lie. Bryce knew it. Elias, trained in interrogation and deception detection, knew it instantly. There had been no burglaries in Oak Ridge in months. "I see," Elias said evenly. He slowly reached into the console, pulling out his rental agreement, and then reached into his back pocket, extracting his civilian leather wallet. He deliberately bypassed the inner breast pocket of his jacket, where his heavy gold FBI credentials rested. A part of Elias, the tired uncle, wanted to flash the badge, pull rank, and watch the arrogant cop pale and apologize. But another part of him, the seasoned investigator who despised corruption, wanted to see exactly how far this officer was willing to go. Elias knew that if this cop was doing this to him, a middle-aged man quietly drinking coffee, he was absolutely doing it to young kids, to innocent people who did not have the power to fight back. Elias decided in that split second to let Officer Vance Harlan dig his own grave. He handed over his Virginia driver's license. Elias Caldwell, Vance read aloud, his tone dripping with disdain. Long way from home, Elias. What are you doing in Oak Ridge? Visiting family, Elias replied. And my name is Mr. Caldwell. Vance's eyes narrowed into dangerous slits. Step out of the vehicle. The morning air seemed to grow colder. Bryce stepped back from the passenger window, his hand hovering near his radio. Vance, Bryce muttered across the roof of the car. We got the ID. He's clear. Let's just run it and go. Shut up, Nolan, Vance ordered without looking away from Elias. I told you to step out of the vehicle, Caldwell. Now. Officer, Elias said, his voice maintaining that maddeningly steady, calm cadence. You have my identification. You have my rental agreement. I am not a flight risk, and I am not a threat. Ordering me out of the car escalates a situation that requires no escalation. I'd ask you again, what specific crime do you suspect me of committing? Refusal to obey a lawful order, Vance shouted, stepping back and unsnapping the retention strap on his holster. The threat was explicit. Get out of the damn car before I pull you out. Elias looked at the officer's hand, hovering over the gun. He calculated the variables. He was a high-level federal agent, but right now, he was just a man in a hoodie facing down an armed, unstable local cop. The safest play was compliance followed by absolute, devastating legal retribution. All right, Elias said softly. I am stepping out of the vehicle. He opened the door slowly and stepped onto the pavement. He was slightly taller than Vance, standing at 6'2", with a broad, athletic build maintained by strict federal fitness standards. Vance, feeling instantly threatened by Elias's physical presence, grabbed Elias roughly by the shoulder and spun him around, slamming him face first against the side of the blue sedan. Hands on the roof, spread your legs, Vance yelled. Elias gritted his teeth as his jaw hit the cold metal of the car, but he complied, spreading his arms and legs. Vance kicked Elias's ankles further apart, unnecessarily rough. Officer Nolan, Elias spoke loudly, ensuring the rookie could hear him. I want you to note that I am fully compliant, offering zero physical resistance, and your partner has just initiated a physical assault without probable cause. Shut your mouth, Vance snarled, beginning a rough, invasive pat-down. He felt up and down Elias's legs, grabbed his waist, and patted down the outside of his gray hoodie. He felt the civilian wallet in the back pocket, but crucially failed to pat down the heavier inner breast pocket of the jacket underneath the hoodie. Vance was angry and sloppy, operating on pure adrenaline and prejudice rather than police training. You got any weapons on you? Needles? Anything that's going to stick me? Vance demanded, pressing his forearm hard against the back of Elias's neck. I have no weapons, Elias stated, and you are currently applying excessive force. I'll show you excessive force, you arrogant... Vance trailed off, pulling Elias's arms behind his back. The sharp, metallic ratcheting sound of handcuffs echoed on the quiet street. Vance clamped the steel cuffs around Elias's wrists, tightening them a few notches past what was necessary, ensuring they bit painfully into the skin. Bryce walked around the back of the car, his face pale. Vance, what are we arresting him for? Disorderly conduct? Resisting arrest? Failure to comply, Vance listed off rapidly, thoroughly enjoying the feeling of absolute power. He spun Elias around to face him. You thought you could come into my town and act like you own the place. You thought you could talk back to me. You're going to spend the next stretch in a concrete box, Elias. Let's see how smart you sound then. Elias looked at Vance. There was no fear in Elias's eyes. There was not even anger. There was only a cold, clinical observation. It was the look a scientist gives a particularly nasty insect before dropping it into a jar of formaldehyde. "Officer Harlan," Elias said, reading the man's name tag, "I want to be very clear with you. I am officially invoking my right to remain silent from this point forward regarding your fabricated charges. However, I highly suggest you reconsider this course of action. If you put me in the back of that cruiser, you will cross a line from which your career will not recover." Vance threw his head back and let out a barking laugh. "Are you threatening me? Add threatening a police officer to the charges. Get in the car." Vance grabbed the back of Elias's hoodie and marched him toward the cruiser. He opened the rear door and, instead of guiding him in, shoved Elias hard. Elias awkwardly fell onto the hard plastic back seat, his cuffed hands trapped painfully beneath him. Vance slammed the door shut and turned to Bryce, a massive grin on his face. "See, rookie? That's how you handle these types. You show them who the alpha is right from the start. They back down every time." Bryce swallowed the lump in his throat, looking through the wire mesh at the man in the back seat. Elias had managed to sit himself upright. He was staring straight ahead. He did not look like a man who had backed down. He looked like a man who was waiting for a timer to reach 0. "Let's get him processed," Vance said, strutting around to the driver's seat. As the patrol car pulled away from Elmwood Avenue, leaving the blue rental car sitting alone by the curb, Elias sat in silence. The steel cuffs dug into his wrists, sending sharp pains up his forearms. He ignored it. His mind was already miles away, calculating the logistics of the bureaucratic apocalypse he was about to unleash upon the Oak Ridge Police Department. The drive to the Oak Ridge precinct was tense. For the entire ride, Vance Harlan monologued from the front seat, acting as both judge and jury. "You guys always think you're so smart with your articulable suspicion garbage," Vance mocked, glancing at Elias in the rearview mirror. "Watch a couple of YouTube videos and suddenly you're constitutional lawyers. Well, out here in the real world, the badge makes the rules. And in my town, you don't talk back." Elias remained entirely silent. He focused his gaze out the window, watching the expensive boutiques and tree-lined streets roll by. He was memorizing badge numbers, patrol car numbers, and plotting the exact timeline of events. "Not so chatty now, are we?" Vance taunted. Bryce gripped the door handle tightly, wishing he were anywhere else. "Vance, seriously, maybe we should just write him a citation for whatever and let him go at the station. We don't have body cam footage of him casing the place." "We don't need body cams to prove he was being combative, Nolan. My word is gold with the captain," Vance scoffed. They arrived at the precinct, a modern brick and glass building that looked more like a corporate office than a police station. Vance hauled Elias out of the back of the cruiser by his chained arms, earning a sharp wince from Elias that he quickly suppressed. Vance marched him through the double glass doors and into the bustling booking area. Phones were ringing, a few officers were typing at their desks, and the smell of stale coffee hung in the air. At the elevated front desk sat Sergeant Peterson, an older, heavy-set man nearing retirement who looked perpetually bored. He looked down over his reading glasses as Vance paraded Elias up to the counter. "Morning, Vance. What do we have here?" Peterson asked, pulling a blank booking sheet toward him. "Got a live one, Sarge," Vance said loudly, puffing out his chest. "Elias Caldwell. Found him casing the businesses on Elmwood. Refused to provide ID initially, got combative, refused a lawful order, and physically resisted detention. Bryce stood a few feet away, staring at the floor, absolutely mortified by the string of casual perjury pouring out of his training officer's mouth. Peterson sighed, picking up a pen. "Any injuries to officers?" "No, I handled him," Vance bragged. Peterson looked at Elias. "All right, Mr. Caldwell. We're going to inventory your pockets, take your prints, and put you in a holding cell. You'll see a magistrate." Elias looked directly at the desk sergeant. His voice, when he finally spoke, was so calm, so devoid of the usual panic or anger seen in arrested individuals, that it made Peterson pause. "Sergeant Peterson," Elias said clearly, ensuring his voice carried across the quiet booking room, "I'm informing you that Officer Harlan has just filed a false verbal report. I was sitting in my vehicle drinking coffee. I provided my identification immediately upon request. I was ordered out of my vehicle without probable cause, assaulted and arrested without merit. I request that you secure all dashcam footage from Officer Harlan's vehicle immediately before it is accidentally deleted." The room went dead silent. Two officers at nearby desks stopped typing. Vance stepped forward, pointing a finger in Elias's face. "You shut your mouth. You're a criminal. Sitting in my jail. You don't make demands." Peterson frowned, looking from the furious Vance to the unnervingly calm Elias. He had dealt with thousands of suspects. Usually they were screaming, crying, or fighting. This man was talking like a lawyer dictating a memo. "Vance, calm down," Peterson muttered. He turned back to Elias. "Mr. Caldwell, you can argue your case to the judge. Right now, empty your pockets." "My hands are cuffed behind my back," Elias pointed out reasonably. "Right," Peterson grunted. "Vance, uncuff him. Let him empty his pockets, then put him in holding cell 3. Vance snatched his keys and roughly unlocked the cuffs. Elias brought his arms forward, rubbing his bruised wrists slowly. He reached into his pants pockets, placing his keys, some loose change, and a pack of gum on the counter. "Everything," Vance ordered. "Jacket pockets, too." Elias paused. He looked at Vance, then at Peterson. "Sergeant, before I empty my jacket pockets, I would like to exercise my right to a phone call immediately." "You get a call after you're booked," Vance snapped. "Actually," Peterson corrected, a stickler for procedure when the room was quiet enough for everyone to hear. "He can make a call while I run his prints. Go ahead, use the wall phone." Elias walked slowly over to the heavy metal phone bolted to the cinder block wall. He picked up the receiver and dialed a Washington, D.C. area code from memory. Vance leaned against the desk, smirking at Bryce. Probably calling his public defender or his mommy to come post bail. Elias stood with his back to the room. The phone rang twice before it was picked up on a highly secure, encrypted line at the J. Edgar Hoover Building in Washington, D.C. "Graves," a sharp voice answered. It was Special Agent in Charge David Reynolds, Elias's right-hand man and the acting director of the task force while Elias was on leave. "David," Elias said quietly, his tone shifting instantly from civilian suspect to commanding officer. "It's Elias." "Director Caldwell?" David replied, his tone immediately respectful. "I thought you were off the grid until the graduation. Is everything all right?" "There has been a slight change of plans," Elias said, his eyes scanning the precinct wall. I've encountered a delay in Oak Ridge. I am currently standing in the booking area of the Oak Ridge Police Department. There was a pause on the line. Sir, are you visiting the local precinct? No, David, I am currently under arrest. Another pause, this one heavy with confusion and rising alarm. Under arrest? Sir, on what charges? Fictitious ones, Elias replied smoothly. Disorderly conduct, resisting arrest. The arresting officer is a Vance Harlan. He's aggressive, legally illiterate, and actively fabricating a report. The sound of a chair violently scraping across a floor echoed through the phone line. Director, this is unacceptable. I am dispatching the regional field office immediately. We will have the local special agent in charge pull you out of there. Negative, David, Elias commanded softly. Do not pull me out just yet. If they do this to me, they do this to the citizens of this town every day. This department needs a thorough audit starting from the top down. Here are my orders. Elias quickly, quietly, rattled off a series of instructions. Vance, watching from across the room, saw Elias whispering into the phone and laughed. Look at him, Vance mocked, begging for a bailout. Elias finished his instructions. Have them assemble outside. Nobody breaches the building until I give the signal. Understand? Understood, Director. We are initiating a Code Alpha response. The Seattle Field Office Rapid Deployment Team is spinning up now. God help those local cops, sir. Just get it done, David, Elias said, and hung up the phone. He turned back to face the room, his face an emotionless mask. He walked back to the counter where Vance and Sergeant Peterson were waiting. Get your lawyer sorted out? Vance sneered. I made my arrangements, Elias said. He then reached into the inner breast pocket of his gray hoodie. Hey, hands where I can see them, Vance barked, his hand dropping to his gun again. Elias slowly withdrew his hand. He was not holding a weapon. He was holding a heavy black leather bifold wallet. It was not his civilian wallet. He tossed it onto the booking counter with a heavy thud. It landed directly on top of the blank police report Vance was supposed to fill out. The leather flipped open upon impact. Gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights of the precinct, pinned next to a federal identification card with Elias's face and an incredibly high clearance level, was a solid gold badge. The eagle of the Federal Bureau of Investigation stared up at the room. Below it, embossed in gold lettering, read, Deputy Director, National Security Branch. Sergeant Peterson's breath hitched in his throat. He stopped breathing entirely. He stared at the gold badge, his eyes wide with absolute, unadulterated terror. Bryce Nolan felt his knees go weak. He had to grab the edge of a nearby desk to stay upright. Vance Harlan stared at the badge. For 3 long seconds, his brain completely refused to process what his eyes were seeing. What? What is this? Vance stammered, his arrogant sneer faltering, replaced by a deep, sudden dread. Is this a fake? You got a fake badge? Elias Caldwell leaned over the counter. The quiet, compliant civilian completely gone, replaced by a man who commanded legions. Officer Harlan, Elias said, his voice dropping the temperature in the room. You are about to have the worst day of your entire miserable life. The silence in the Oak Ridge precinct was absolute, ringing in the ears of every officer present like the aftermath of a flashbang grenade. The only sound was the low, persistent hum of the overhead air conditioning unit and the faint ticking of the wall clock. Sergeant Peterson's hand hovered inches from the heavy leather wallet resting on his booking log. He did not dare touch it. He leaned in just enough to read the embossed gold lettering again, praying his aging eyes were playing a cruel trick on him. Deputy Director, National Security Branch. A bead of cold sweat broke out on Peterson's forehead, tracing a slow path down his temple. He looked up at Elias Caldwell, the man who, just moments ago, had been a faceless suspect to be processed and forgotten, had transformed into an immovable mountain of federal authority. "Vance," Peterson whispered, his voice cracking violently. "Vance? What have you done?" Officer Vance Harlan let out a nervous, breathy chuckle that sounded entirely unhinged. He aggressively pointed a thick finger at the wallet. "It's a fake, Sarge. Come on, look at him. You think the Deputy Director of the FBI is driving a rented Ford Taurus and drinking coffee on Elmwood? It's a Halloween prop. I'm tagging him for impersonating a federal officer, too." Elias did not blink. He reached out with terrifying slowness, picking up the wallet. He flipped it open toward Peterson. "Sergeant, there is a QR code on the back of the identification card. Scan it with your department-issued terminal. It links directly to the Department of Justice verified database. Do it now." Peterson swallowed hard. His hands shook as he grabbed the barcode scanner attached to his computer. He pulled the trigger, sweeping the red laser across the back of Elias's ID. The precinct computer chirped. The screen blinked, bypassing the standard local criminal database, and immediately brought up a secure, encrypted federal portal. A high-resolution photograph of Elias Caldwell filled the monitor. Below it, in bold, flashing green text, were the words, "Clearance level, top secret /SCI. Active. Status, Deputy Director, NSB. Flag. Immediate notification to OIG upon detention." Peterson practically collapsed backward into his rolling chair, the scanner dropping from his hand and clattering noisily against the linoleum floor. All the color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a ghost in a blue uniform. "It's real," Peterson gasped, looking at Vance with a mixture of horror and profound rage. "You idiot. You absolute, colossal idiot. You just arrested the Deputy Director of the FBI." Bryce Nolan, the rookie, slid down the side of a nearby filing cabinet until he was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. His career was over. His life was over. He was an accessory to the kidnapping of a federal executive. No, wait," Vance stammered, stepping back, his hands raised as if trying to physically push reality away. "He was resisting. He didn't tell me who he was. If he was a Fed, he should have flashed the badge at the window. This is on him. He baited me. I am under no legal obligation to identify myself as a federal agent to avoid an unlawful arrest by a local municipal officer," Elias stated, his voice ringing with absolute clinical precision. "Your lack of probable cause, your immediate escalation to physical violence, and your subsequent falsification of charges were entirely your own operational choices, Officer Harlan." The heavy wooden door to the precinct captain's office suddenly swung open. Chief of Police Owen Grady, a polished, politically savvy man who spent more time on the golf course with the mayor than on the streets, stepped out. He had heard the shouting. "What is going on out here?" Chief Grady demanded, adjusting his tie. Peterson, why is it so loud in the booking area? Peterson could not speak. He just shakily pointed a finger at the computer monitor and then at Elias. Grady marched over, annoyed. He glanced at the monitor. He stopped walking. His jaw literally dropped. He looked at the screen, looked at the man in the faded gray hoodie standing calmly at his booking counter, and felt his stomach plummet into his shoes. Grady was a politician. He instantly recognized the apocalyptic magnitude of the situation. This was not a lawsuit. This was the kind of event that resulted in federal consent decrees, dismantled police departments, and prison sentences for command staff. Director Caldwell, Chief Grady said, his voice instantly transforming into a panicked, placating purr. He shoved Vance roughly out of the way. Sir, my profound apologies. This is a catastrophic misunderstanding, a terrible lapse in judgment by a subordinate. Chief Grady, I presume? Elias asked evenly. Yes, sir. Owen Grady. Please let me get you a coffee. Come into my office. We are wiping this entirely from the record. You are free to go immediately. Officer Harlan will be severely disciplined, I assure you. Grady reached out as if to guide Elias by the arm, desperate to get him out of the public booking area. Elias did not move an inch. He looked down at Grady's hand until the chief nervously withdrew it. I am not going anywhere, Chief Grady, Elias said, his voice dropping into a deadly quiet register. I have been formally detained. I have been physically assaulted, handcuffed, and transported against my will under threat of deadly force. Furthermore, Officer Harlan has publicly and verbally initiated false charges against me in the presence of 2 witnesses. Sir, please, Grady begged, sweat suddenly blooming on his upper lip. Let's handle this professionally between agencies. We don't need to. We are well past professional courtesy, Chief, Elias interrupted. If I walk out that door, you will suspend Officer Harlan for a stretch, with pay, sweep the dashcam footage into a digital incinerator, and go back to terrorizing the citizens of Oak Ridge who don't have gold badges to protect them. No, I want the booking process completed. Grady looked like he was going to vomit. Sir, I want you to formally book me. I want Officer Harlan to put his fabricated narrative in writing under penalty of perjury, and then I'm going to sit on that wooden bench. Elias pointed to the holding area. And wait. Wait for what? Vance asked, his voice shaking. The bravado was completely gone, replaced by the terror of a bully who had just punched a sleeping bear. Elias checked the sleek analog watch on his wrist. For the United States government. The next stretch was agonizing. The atmosphere inside the Oak Ridge Police Department felt less like a workplace and more like the interior of a submarine, descending past its crushed depth. Elias Caldwell sat perfectly straight on the hard wooden bench of the holding pen. He had refused offers of water, coffee, and desperate apologies from Chief Grady. He sat with his hands resting on his knees, a silent, immovable statue of impending doom. Across the room, Vance Harlan was pacing frantically. He had tried to leave the building claiming he needed air, but Chief Grady had barked at him to stay put, confiscating Vance's service weapon and badge in a panic-stricken attempt to show Elias he was taking action. Vance looked sick. The reality of federal prison was wrapping its cold hands around his throat. He kept muttering to himself, trying to piece together a defense that did not exist. Rookie Bryce Nolan remained sitting on the floor by the filing cabinet, quietly writing out a meticulous, brutally honest account of the morning's events in his notebook. Bryce knew he was collateral damage, but his only chance at avoiding a federal indictment was absolute, unvarnished cooperation. "Director, please," Chief Grady tried one last time, standing on the other side of the holding pen bars, holding a perfectly clean release form. "If the DOJ gets involved in this, it's going to destroy the department. The media is the least of your concerns, Chief," Elias replied calmly, not looking up. "A police department that operates a rogue precinct, fueled by profiling and unconstitutional detentions, is a threat to civil liberties. I am merely the catalyst for an audit that is long overdue." Before Grady could respond, a low, powerful vibration resonated through the floorboards of the precinct. It was the synchronized rumbling of massive, high-output engines. Outside the glass doors of the precinct, the bright morning sun was suddenly blocked out. Sergeant Peterson stood up, peering over the booking counter. "Chief," he whispered. 4 heavily armored, matte black Chevrolet Suburbans abruptly jumped the curb, parking in a tight, tactical V formation that completely blockaded the precinct's front entrance and the adjacent patrol cars. The vehicles had no markings, save for small, recessed blue and red strobes, pulsing intensely in the grills and windshields. A 5th vehicle, a massive mobile command center tactical truck, roared down the street and violently blocked the rear exit of the precinct, cutting off any avenue of escape. "Oh, God," Vance choked out, backing away from the windows. The doors of the SUVs flew open in perfect unison. Over 20 heavily armed federal agents poured out. They were clad in dark olive tactical gear, Kevlar vests emblazoned with massive yellow FBI lettering, and carried short-barreled rifles resting precisely on their slings. They moved with a terrifying silent efficiency that made the local Oak Ridge cops look like children playing dress-up. Leading the charge was Special Agent in Charge David Reynolds. Reynolds was a tall, imposing man with a neatly trimmed beard and eyes like cracked ice. He was the head of the Seattle field office, and he looked incredibly angry. Reynolds did not bother opening the glass doors. 2 tactical agents stepped forward, slammed a heavy breaching ram against the lock, and the double doors shattered inward with a deafening crash, showering the lobby in tempered safety glass. "FBI, nobody move, hands away from your weapons!" a tactical commander roared, his voice amplified by the enclosed space. The Oak Ridge officers completely froze. Some raised their hands instantly. Others stepped back from their desks, terrified. The sheer overwhelming force of the federal response was paralyzing. Agents flooded the room, instantly securing the perimeter, locking down the exits, and taking positions behind cover. 2 agents immediately flanked the booking counter, leveling their weapons toward the floor, but keeping Sergeant Peterson strictly in their sights. David Reynolds strode through the shattered doors, his boots crunching loudly on the glass. He ignored Chief Grady, who was waving his hands frantically. He ignored the terrified officers. He walked straight toward the holding pen. When Reynolds saw Elias Caldwell sitting on the bench, locked behind a steel grate, a dangerous muscle feathered in his jaw. "Director," Reynolds said. Reynolds, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Agent Reynolds, excellent response time," Elias noted, finally standing up. Reynolds turned to Chief Grady, who was trembling so hard his keys were jingling. "Open this cell right now." Grady fumbled with his master keys, dropping them twice, before finally jamming the right one into the lock. He pulled the heavy barred door open. Elias stepped out. He did not stretch. He did not look relieved. He looked exactly the same as he had when he was sitting in his car drinking coffee, in absolute control. "Are you injured, sir?" Reynolds asked quietly. "Bruised wrists, nothing requiring immediate medical attention," Elias replied. He turned his gaze across the room, locking eyes with Vance Harlan. Vance was backed against a wall, flanked by two heavily armed FBI agents who looked ready to tackle him through the drywall. "The tactical team is securing the building, Director," Reynolds reported. "We have warrants signed by a federal judge. We are seizing all servers, physical files, dashcam footage, and personnel records. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division is already en route from D.C. "Good," Elias said. He slowly walked over to where Vance was standing. The room was deathly quiet, save for the heavy breathing of the terrified local police. Elias stopped 2 feet in front of Vance. The bully was gone. In his place was a broken, weeping man. "You thought you were the predator," Elias said, his voice low, slicing through the quiet room. "You thought this badge gave you the right to hunt people you deemed beneath you. You operated under the delusion that power exists without accountability." Elias reached out and tapped the empty space on Vance's chest where his badge used to be. "True power," Elias continued, "is knowing you can destroy someone and choosing not to unless absolutely necessary. You had no such restraint. Therefore, you are no longer fit to hold authority of any kind." Elias turned to Reynolds. "Agent Reynolds, execute the arrest warrant." David Reynolds stepped forward, pulling a heavy pair of federal restraints from his tactical vest. "Vance Harlan," Reynolds boomed, his voice carrying the full weight of the United States government. "You are under arrest for the violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. You are also being charged with federal kidnapping, aggravated assault, and falsifying official government records." Vance sobbed openly, his knees buckling. "Please, I have a family. It was a mistake. I didn't know who he was." "That is exactly the point," Elias said coldly. "If I were a carpenter or a teacher or a delivery driver, I would be sitting in a concrete cell right now with ruined wrists and a fabricated criminal record. And you would be bragging to your friends about it. Put him in the car." 2 tactical agents grabbed Vance by the arms, dragging him to his feet. They hauled him roughly across the precinct, his boots dragging on the floor, and shoved him through the shattered glass doors toward one of the waiting black SUVs. The flashing red and blue lights illuminated his tear-streaked face as the heavy door slammed shut, sealing his fate. Chief Grady stepped forward, wiping his forehead with a monogrammed handkerchief. "Director Caldwell, please believe me, I had no idea Harlan was operating like this. This is an isolated incident. I am fully prepared to cooperate." "Save it for the grand jury, Chief Grady," Elias cut him off. "Grand jury?" Grady squeaked, his political veneer crumbling. Elias gestured to the FBI agents who were already unspooling Ethernet cables and carrying heavy Pelican cases into the server room. "Do you really think I authorized a raid just for one bad patrolman? You don't bring a wrecking ball to kill a termite, Chief. You bring it to level the entire rotten structure. Elias stepped closer to Grady, his height and presence dominating the smaller man. I spent my time in your holding cell reviewing digital files pulled by my cyber division, Elias explained, his voice a low, terrifying hum. We didn't just look at Officer Harlan, we looked at your entire department. We found the excessive force complaints against Harlan that you personally buried. We found the targeted traffic stop quotas, focusing exclusively on minority drivers entering Oak Ridge. We found the misappropriated forfeiture funds flowing into your precinct's recreational budget. Grady went pale. He stumbled backward, hitting the booking counter. You hacked my department? I authorized a federal emergency audit, Elias corrected smoothly. And what we found was a systemic, top-down criminal enterprise operating disguised as a police force. Harlan was just the symptom. You, Chief Grady, are the disease. Agent Reynolds stepped up next to Grady. Owen Grady, you are also being taken into federal custody. Charges include obstruction of justice, conspiracy to violate civil rights, and official corruption. Hands behind your back. The remaining Oak Ridge officers watched in stunned, absolute silence as their chief of police, a man who had ruled the town with impunity for years, was handcuffed and read his rights by federal agents. Elias watched them march Grady out. He felt a deep, profound sense of exhaustion wash over him, but also a sharp, satisfying clarity. He turned and saw Bryce Nolan still sitting on the floor, clutching his notebook. Elias walked over to the young rookie. Bryce flinched as the deputy director approached. Officer Nolan, Elias said gently. Bryce looked up, his eyes wide and terrified. Sir, I didn't touch you. I tried to tell him to stop. I wrote it all down. Everything he said. Everything he lied about. It's all here. Bryce held up the notebook like a shield. Elias took the notebook, glancing at the meticulous, nervous handwriting. He looked back at Bryce. He saw a kid who was in for his head. A kid who had been paralyzed by a toxic culture, but who had not completely lost his moral compass. Stand up, son, Elias ordered softly. Bryce scrambled to his feet. You failed to intervene today, Elias said, his tone stern but not devoid of empathy. When another officer abuses their power, silence is complicity. You wear a badge. Your duty is to the law and the public, not to your training officer's fragile ego. Do you understand? Yes, sir, I know. I was just scared of him. Fear is natural. Letting it dictate your duty is unacceptable, Elias said. He handed the notebook back to Bryce. Agent Reynolds will be taking your statement. Be completely honest. Your cooperation today will determine if you ever wear a uniform again. If you survive this audit, I suggest you find a department that values integrity over intimidation. I will, sir. Thank you. I'm so sorry. Elias simply nodded. He turned away from the terrified rookie and walked toward the center of the shattered precinct. Agents were bustling everywhere. Filing cabinets were being emptied into evidence boxes. Hard drives were being cloned. The corrupt kingdom of the Oak Ridge Police Department was being methodically, brutally dismantled brick by the very system they thought they could manipulate. Agent Reynolds walked up to Elias, handing him his tablet and the keys to his rental car. Sir, your vehicle has been secured. Your sister called your encrypted line. We informed her you were delayed by a minor traffic incident, but are on your way. Elias took the keys, a rare, genuine, albeit small, smile touching his lips. "Thank you, David. Excellent work today." "We'll tear it down to the studs, Director," Reynolds promised. Elias walked out through the shattered glass doors. The morning air was still crisp, but the atmosphere felt entirely different. The fleet of black SUVs sat idling, a stark reminder of the immense, invisible forces that govern the world. He walked past the cruiser where Vance Harlan sat in the back, locked in a cage of his own making, weeping as he watched the deputy director walk free. Elias got into his blue sedan, started the engine, and finally took a sip of his cold macchiato. It tasted bitter, but the victory was incredibly sweet. He put the car in drive and pulled away, leaving the ruins of a corrupt precinct behind him, heading off to his niece's graduation. He was just a quiet man in a gray hoodie. But today, he had reminded a town exactly what true justice looked like. In the United States District Court in Seattle, the heavy oak doors swung shut, sealing the fate of the men who had once believed they were untouchable. The sweeping federal audit initiated by Elias Caldwell had unspooled a web of corruption so dense it made national headlines. Investigative journalist David Gallagher, who broke the exclusive, deeply researched details of the story for a major media syndicate, called it the most profound, localized abuse of power of the decade. Gallagher's explosive front-page piece, titled "The Predators in Blue: How Oak Ridge Fell," exposed the precise, terrifying mechanisms of the precinct's civil rights violations. He published the leaked quotas, the buried complaints, and the exact transcripts of the dashcam footage the FBI had salvaged from the precinct servers. The expose prompted a massive wave of internal affairs investigations across the entire state, creating a domino effect of accountability that turned this local drama into a real-life catalyst for sweeping municipal reform. Vance Harlan stood trembling before federal judge Harlan Kensington. He was no longer wearing his tailored pressed uniform or his heavy utility belt. Instead, he wore the shapeless, bright orange jumpsuit of a federal inmate. His wrists, which he had so eagerly and mercilessly used to inflict pain on others, were now bound tightly in heavy steel transport chains. He looked gaunt, stripped of his arrogant sneer, and utterly defeated. "Vance Harlan," Judge Kensington's voice boomed across the silent, packed courtroom. "You used your badge not as a shield for the vulnerable, but as a weapon of intimidation. You preyed on innocent citizens, fabricated evidence to satisfy your own malicious prejudices, and operated under the delusion that your authority was absolute. The hard karma of your actions has finally and permanently caught up with you." The judge brought the wooden gavel down with a deafening crack, sentencing Vance to a term in a maximum security federal penitentiary with no possibility of early parole. As federal marshals grabbed Vance by the arms to lead him away, he did not fight. He just hung his head and wept. The reality of his new life, a disgraced, convicted cop in a federal prison, crushing whatever was left of his ego. Chief Owen Grady did not fare much better. In a desperate bid to save himself, he had attempted to throw his entire command staff under the bus. But the FBI's cyber division had already recovered his deleted emails, detailing the misappropriation of funds. Grady was stripped of his pension, publicly disgraced, and sentenced to a term for conspiracy and obstruction of justice. The once feared Oak Ridge Police Department was completely disbanded, its duties permanently absorbed by the county sheriff's office under a strict, federally mandated consent decree. As for Bryce Nolan, the young rookie took Elias Caldwell's stern advice to heart. He provided hours of crucial testimony, completely corroborating the FBI's findings and ensuring the conviction stuck. Realizing that the systemic issues in law enforcement required a different kind of fight, Bryce resigned from the police force. He used his savings to enroll in law school, determined to become a civil rights attorney who would hold the system accountable from the outside. Back in Washington, D.C., Elias Caldwell sat in his secure office overlooking the city. He watched a brief news segment on a muted television detailing the final sentencing in Seattle. He did not smile, nor did he celebrate. For him, this was not a game of personal revenge. It was a necessary, surgical correction of a broken system. He took a sip of his black coffee, turned his attention back to the towering stack of national security briefings on his desk, and went back to work. The quiet man in the gray hoodie had spoken, and the world had listened. This story serves as a powerful reminder that true authority does not come from a badge or a uniform, but from integrity, accountability, and the courage to do what is right. The hard karma that caught up with Vance Harlan proves that no one is untouchable when they abuse their power. If you felt the justice in this incredible, real-life, inspired tale of a corrupt system finally being brought to its knees, we nod your support to keep bringing these stories to light. Please hit that like button, share this video with your friends and family to spread the message that nobody is above the law, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling, dramatic, and satisfying stories of instant karma and ultimate justice. Do not forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching, and stay safe out there.